April the 30th, 1945, the Fuhrerbunker in Berlin. A husband and wife of around 40 hours disappeared together into his study after saying their final goodbyes. This is not just a normal couple, it was the dictator of the Third Reich and Eva Braun. They sat down on a sofa inside of a concrete room, and 45 minutes later, a gunshot was heard by those who anxiously waited outside. Eva Braun was the longtime girlfriend of Adolf Hitler, and she began seeing the dictator after he visited his photographer's studio, and he noticed this young 17-year-old girl. Hitler himself was much older, and her life was changed from that moment on. Eva didn't always have the happiest of lives, but she benefited hugely from the wealth that came with being the dictator's girlfriend and life partner. But following her death, her body was burned in a bomb crater inside of the crumbling city of Berlin. But what is not as well known is that the remains of Eva Braun were in fact buried weeks after her death and were left then for 25 years until they were finally dealt with once and for all. In this video we look at what was discovered when the Soviets opened her grave and also when she was exhumed for a final time. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Eva Braun grew up alongside her sisters and probably dreamed of marrying a powerful and wealthy man. In 1932, she met Adolf Hitler for the first time. She had been staying late to file some papers at work in the studio of Heinrich Hoffmann, Hitler's personal photographer, when the future dictator walked in. She described him as, and I quote, a man of uncertain age with a funny moustache, a light-coloured English-style overcoat and a big felt hat in his hand. Eva joined Hitler and Hoffmann for dinner, and the truth is that Hitler could not keep his eyes off her. Eva was a relatively good-looking girl. It was said that she had pale blonde hair, cut short, blue eyes, and although she had been educated in a Catholic convent, she had learned feminine wiles, a certain look and swaying hips when she walked, which made men turn their heads. But after beginning a relationship with Hitler officially, things were kept very secret. She began to see more of him following his half-niece and rumoured lover, Gaily Raubel's self-inflicted death. But the early years of their relationship were plagued with Eva's attempts to get the attention of her increasingly famous politician boyfriend. She tried to take her own life in August 1932 by shooting herself in the chest with her father's pistol in an attempt to get Hitler to be more committed to her. This, in a strange way, did succeed, and they then went on more trips together. As a photographer, Eva Braun took many interesting pictures within the inner circle, and she documented much of the days at the mountain retreat of the Berghof. She later tried to take her own life again in May 1935, as following Hitler becoming Chancellor and then the Fuhrer, his time was even more scarce. She was then given her own flat inside the new Reich Chancellery, the governmental headquarters in Berlin, and also was given a beach house. She was present at the Nuremberg rallies, but Hitler wanted to portray an image that he was a chaste hero who was only focused on saving Germany. He didn't want the world to know that he had a girlfriend, and with this he and Eva never appeared together as a couple in public, and people, even after the Second World War had come to an end, had absolutely no idea that their Fuhrer was even in a relationship. But she continued to live a very lavish life as mentioned, and she held many parties inside Hitler's apartments and houses, and these were usually very extravagant occasions, with much drinking and frivolity. The pair had interconnecting doors inside of the Berghof, the mountain retreat, and would spend long evenings together after Hitler had finished ranting at people who were having meetings with him. The issue with Eva Braun is that she never really had any influence at all on her boyfriend with regards to politics and his behaviour, and she was rather submissive to him. They were also incredibly different. She was young and carefree. He was middle-aged and stressed all of the time. She drank wine. He drank tea. She ate meat. He did not. She wanted some affection. He did not. She also had to deal with other women who got closer to Hitler, but eventually Eva Braun remained. She stayed loyal when people told her to escape and make a run for it. Another one of the Nazi wives told her that she should go into hiding after the end of the Second World War, but she then claimed, "Do you think I would let him die alone? I will stay with him up until the last moment. And that is exactly what she did. When Hitler said he would remain in Berlin in 1945 and see out the end of the Second World War, which was a loss, inside of the Fuhrerbunker in the capital of the Reich, Eva Braun said she would stay by his side. This meant that in April 1945 she took up residence inside of the underground complex at the back of the Reich Chancellery. Eva Braun was named in Hitler's will, and she was to receive a yearly payment of 12,000 Reichmarks a year following Hitler's death. This meant that she was probably not supposed to die in Berlin in April 1945, but within the bunker, around midnight on the 29th of April 1945, Hitler and Eva Braun were married in a small ceremony, with Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels and Private Secretary Martin Bormann acting as witnesses. Eva signed her wedding certificate with the surname Hitler, but to begin with began writing Braun, and then crossed out the B. The next day on the 30th of April 1945, the pair said their goodbyes. The war was well and truly lost for the Germans, and Hitler had made his mind up. He was going to die in the bunker. He did ask Eva a number of times to leave the bunker, and if she would have done, she probably would have survived the war and the chaos that came with it after with regards to the trials of war criminals. At around 2:30 p.m. on the 30th of April, the Hitlers made their way into his study, and around 45 minutes to an hour later, a loud gunshot was heard. Hitler's adjutant burst in, and he saw the Fuhrer and Eva Braun dead on the sofa. She had consumed cyanide, meaning that she probably died before Hitler did, and that he would probably have witnessed her demise before the gunshot went off. People burst in within a minute or two of the gunshot, meaning that Eva had been dead probably for minutes before. The corpses were wrapped up in a blanket or a rug, and they were then carried out of the Fuhrerbunker and were placed inside of a bomb crater. The Reich Chancellery Garden, where the body of Eva was placed, was littered with bomb damage, and shells were still falling all over the garden. Before, Hitler had ordered a huge amount of fuel to be gathered, despite the shortages, to deal with the disposal of his and her remains, and Eva Braun's body was placed in a hole next to Hitler's, doused with petrol, and it was then ignited. To begin with, there were problems with starting the fire, and Martin Bormann then grabbed some papers from the bunker, lit these and then threw them onto the body, with he beginning the cremation. The bodies burned for around 4 hours, and it was later claimed by those who witnessed the cremations that the remains were reduced to a mix of ash and charred bones by 6:30 that evening, and they were then covered over in a bomb crater with soil. For days the bombing continued, and people could not spend much time in the garden because of the danger. So earth may have been piled onto the gravesite of Eva Braun and Hitler, and there may have also been debris built up on top of it. It was on the 2nd of May 1945 that the Soviets captured the Reich Chancellery. To begin with, they did not find any remains of Hitler or Eva Braun, but then after being ordered to look again by Joseph Stalin, they discovered the remains of Hitler and Braun. Now, the truth is that there's a huge amount of speculation as to specifically the remains of Hitler's wife. The Soviets had dug in the garden before, and after much searching, they did discover some teeth and jawbones, and a skull with a bullet hole in it. They also found charred bones and ashes. These remains were packaged up, and were then moved a number of times. Now, here's where we go into controversy. Specifically relating to Eva, found was a dental bridge, with Hitler's dental assistant, Kaffir Häusermann, confirming that it in fact belonged to Eva. But there was also other debate, as other dentists said that Eva's teeth were actually in good condition, and that no bridge had been fitted to her mouth before her death, or at the time of her death. She had no false teeth and no bridges. So what was the dental bridge which was found? This is still mysterious, especially as it was not damaged by the fire, unlike the rest of Eva's corpse. So was this planted on the remains? It is very possible that the bridges were discovered in the Reich Chancellery and the specific dental offices that were there, and that they may have been planted on the corpse or charred remains of Eva Braun. These dental pieces were used to identify the corpse of Eva. But dentists who treated her, specifically senior dental official Hugo Blaschka, insisted the bridge had never been fitted. But what happened to the remains? Well, let's assume that they did belong to her. The corpse of Eva Braun and Hitler, along with that of the Goebbels family and those who died inside the Fuhrerbunker and the Reich Chancellery, were taken to the Red Army headquarters at Plötzensee in the Charlottenburg region of the city. Eva's remains were placed inside of a coffin, and then an autopsy was performed. The Soviets confirmed that cyanide was present in the remains, but then after this the corpse and remains were eventually buried inside of Magdeburg and a Smersh Secret Service facility. They were left until 1970, when the facility was under the control of the KGB, and then when the building was to be returned to the Germans, KGB Director Yuri Andropov ordered the exhumation of the remains and those who had died inside the Fuhrerbunker and within the Reich Chancellery Garden. The coffin of Eva Braun was dug up and was placed on the back of a KGB truck under the cover of nightfall, and it was then taken to a crematorium and further reduced to ash. These remains were then scattered in the Biederitz River. Now there is still a significant amount of debate as to whether the remains discovered inside the Reich Chancellery Garden by the Soviets were Eva Braun's or not. The skull discovered, which was attributed to Hitler with a gunshot wound on it, was later found to belong to a woman much older than Eva. The remains that were found were left in a grave for 25 years after the end of the Second World War, and then were dealt with once and for all. But she was a woman who remained in the shadows during the Second World War, and nearly all of the German population had no idea that their dictator or Fuhrer had a girlfriend or a wife. That was the life and death of Eva Braun. She lived and died in the shadows. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.